Chapter 4. Fake News. The information provided by the media is at the service of the common good. Society has a right to information based on truth, freedom, justice, and solidarity. Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2494. Let's be clear on one thing. The corporate media in our country is no longer involved in journalism. They're a political special interest no different than any lobbyist or other financial entity with a total political agenda. And the agenda is not for you, it's for themselves. Anyone who challenges their control is deemed a sexist, a racist, a xenophobe, and morally deformed. They will lie, and then again, they will do worse than that. They will do whatever's necessary. If the ensuing years since his election have demonstrated anything, it is the mainstream media's wholesale commitment to Donald Trump's destruction rather than honest efforts to cover the news and hold public officials accountable. The two main channels considered, actually blatantly, but let's say considered, anti-Trump, CNN and MSNBC, have given short shrift to his many accomplishments enumerated in Appendix 2. Rather, they have demonstrated a remarkably single-minded focus on anything and everything, no matter how thinly sourced or dubious, that would reflect poorly on the man and tend to his undoing. Examples abound, and those people reading this book who favor those two networks know it is true. How many pro-Trump pieces have you seen over the past 3 years? Or forget about pro-Trump. How many objective news reports on his accomplishments have you seen? Not too many we would be willing to bet. Rather, you have been fed a steady diet of the following stories and others like them that the fake news pushed until they were proven wrong. The Mueller investigation and report, the results of which they do not like. No collusion, no obstruction. It gave Donald Trump a clean bill of health. The aforementioned media outlets, along with many others, devoted a huge percentage of their coverage during the Mueller investigation to their expected outcome. Seemingly on a weekly basis, we were treated to some new bombshell that indicated that Mueller was going to take down the president in the eyes, ears, and mouths of the anti-Trump media. It was only a matter of time. They were wrong. The imminent threat of World War III in the wake of the killing of Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. That never came about. In fact, Trump's leadership seems to have the potential there to reset the Middle East in a way that would usher in a period of relative calm after the disastrous years of Obama, the Clintons, and yes, the Bushes. They, the fake news, were wrong. The various women that were going to bring down the president all fizzles, every last one. Nothing there? Where are they now? Again, they were wrong. The anti-Trump media gave and continues to give a prominent platform to individuals who, for whatever reason, have something negative to say about Donald Trump. Individuals such as Michael Cohen, who is now in jail, Michael Avenatti in jail, and Lev Parnas under indictment. Did these last three guys bring the president down as the anti-Trump media so desperately predicted and hoped? Did any of the other stories? If wishing could make it so, they certainly would have. But they didn't. Again and again, the fake news was wrong. Although this book harkens back to the children's classic, The Emperor's New Clothes, this chapter on the media also calls to mind another one, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. In all the above cases, the fake news, as Trump duped them, more than lived up to that moniker. They were consistently wrong because they have abandoned the practice of journalism. And so, just like the boy in the story, fewer and fewer people believe them. Like Trump or hate him, his indictment of the media has proven to be spot on. Do Rachel Maddow, Don Lemon, and others like them not realize how ridiculous they look in their desperation to get Trump? Or maybe they are finally starting to get it. Just recently, the clip of Don Lemon, anti-Trump political advisor Rick Wilson, and another fellow laughing about and mocking Trump supporters has been making the rounds and has already been turned into a Trump campaign commercial. Hillary Clinton donated the term deplorables to his campaign last time around. It is nice of these three super cool characters to contribute to the cause of this time around. Even some in the media who are no fans of the president have taken such journalists to task for abandoning professional practices in the mad rush to take down the president. Matt Taibbi, a writer with whom practicing Catholics would disagree on many issues, wrote about precisely this bombshells that never went off, egg-on-the-face inviting style of reporting in his January 2020 article in Rolling Stone magazine entitled 2019, a year the news media would rather forget. There, he wrote, as a result, countless tales pitched as bombshells, often pegged to anonymous sources promising to produce proof later on, have turned into super errors in hindsight. Reports by Special Counsel Robert Mueller and Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz exploded claims that Trump lawyer Michael Cohen had met with Russian hackers in Prague, that probable cause existed to believe Trump aide Carter Page was a foreign agent, that Russia and Trump were communicating via a secret internet server, that evidence existed of Russian efforts to sexually blackmail Trump, that Russians had vetoed Mitt Romney as Secretary of State, and many others. Other bombshells died on the launch pad. As these words are being written, the House impeachment managers are trotting out the Russia collusion nonsense as if the Mueller report never happened. These people are rather scary true believers. Anyone that hopes to consume news in a rational way must be aware of certain things. Chief among them, the perspective or editorial slant or bias of the producer of any particular news item. We don't think we need to list the major ones here, as most people are probably aware of their respective biases. That said, a new phenomenon is noticeable with the advent of the presidency of Donald Trump. A viciousness and single-mindedness of purpose in destroying the man and his presidency is easily discernible. Nobody can deny that Trump has achieved much, or at the very least done things in terms of policy that would normally be considered praiseworthy, to say nothing of newsworthy. But more often than not, channels such as CNN or MSNBC, during this first term of his presidency, have been far more likely to run stories on the Mueller probe or exposés of Trump's alleged infidelities from the past, or stories of how he is racist or sexist or a fledgling Hitler, rather than any mention, let alone focus on the remarkable gains in the stock market, foreign policy breakthroughs, employment numbers, details of the highly successful trade deals negotiated, hostages returned, etc. And it would be too much to ask, of course, for any positive reporting on what Trump has accomplished for the pro-life cause, for that constitutes an assault on personal freedom in the minds of the media elite. As an aside, John had the pleasure of watching Morning Joe this morning while flipping channels. Within a couple of minutes, he was treated to the host, John Scarborough, referencing Stalin. Just on time, he thought, as he changed the channel. The term Trump derangement syndrome has been coined to describe people who hate the man so much that all perspective is lost. We Catholics know that wrath is one of the 7 deadly or capital sins, those sins from which so many others flow. In the case of the media, their hatred for Donald Trump has led to a true doubling and tripling down on fake news. That is, lying. The level of hatred directed at President Trump is unlike anything else we have seen in the last century. Yes, politics has been a blood sport for some time, and conservatives miss no opportunity to attack Clinton and then Obama. Undoubtedly, there is a certain level of hatred on that side, but the Trump case is truly special and is more often than not based on false witness, lies, and slanders, sins enumerated in the Catechism, designed to destroy the man and his family. The following constant fake news themes are just some of the accusations that qualify as such. Trump is racist. No, he is not. Nothing from the man's past or present life supports such a charge. He has long been friends with people of all cultures and ethnicities. Look at the report he has quickly developed with foreign leaders from countries as diverse as China, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Italy, Japan, and even North Korea. As the mainstream media lobbed these unfounded accusations at the man, the silent majority looked on and considered the Donald Trump they have seen on TV and in the fake news for the last few decades and thought, fake news. Perhaps the most vivid demonstration of the media's biased attempts to paint him as a racist centered around the Charlottesville tragedy, after which the lie that he supported white supremacists dominated the headlines. An article by Steve Cortez explains that Trump actually said, "Excuse me, they didn't put themselves down as neo-Nazis, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group. Excuse me, I saw the same pictures you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name." After another question at that press conference, Trump became even more explicit. "I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white nationalists because they should be condemned totally." Cortez goes on to describe how, even in the face of that clear disavowal of white supremacists, the lie that Trump's a racist became the narrative. Look up old clips of him with Jesse Jackson, Oprah Winfrey, and other prominent black Americans, even Don King. They did not consider him to be a racist. Donald Trump was never called a racist until he ran for and won the office of President of the United States. That tells you something. As Cortez wrote, "For any honest person, therefore, to conclude that the president somehow praised the very people he actually derided reveals a blatant and blinding level of bias." As this is being written, Trump is gaining more and more momentum with voters of every race. Consult his accomplishments for the black community in the list in the appendix. Consider his efforts on behalf of historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and to rid Latino communities of MS-13, his outreach to Native Americans and Asian Americans, and ask yourself what right Don Lemon and others have to call this man racist. The accusation is a lie, a slander which the anti-Trump media repeats in the hopes of proving the truth of the big lie strategy attributed to Nazi Joseph Goebbels. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Happily, their strategy is failing, for it is so obviously untrue. That they keep repeating it is a testament to their dishonesty. Trump is a misogynist and a rapist and a sexist and an all-around bad guy when it comes to women. No, he is not. He seems to have been a playboy and perhaps at times in the past an unfaithful husband more than anything else, but if that. But we, the authors, don't even know about that. That is, what he did years ago. We have not researched the New York tabloids from last century and are not sure what we would believe if we did. Crude when among men, sure. A millionaire, or did it start with a B even back then? In New York City in the 1970s and 1980s, there is an old saying, where there is smoke, there is fire. But the smoke has to be real, not artificially generated. Trump, a non-drinking man about town in the public eye for decades, still stands because amidst the media-generated smoke about sexual assault, there seems to be nothing there. Affairs many years ago? Perhaps, but we don't even know that. And we were not voting for president, of the parish council. We were voting for President of the United States in 2016 and are preparing to do so again in 2020. Will we have voted for the Donald Trump of the New York scene 30 years ago? We doubt it, but he seems to be very, very happily married now. His children reflect very well on him. As Catholics, our support for Donald Trump means neither that we think he is without sin, though most of the negative things that have been said and written about him for the last few years are false, nor that we should have to defend every one of his actions. And yes, what is more, as Catholics, we will leave the lies, slander, and detraction to others. Trump colluded with Russia. No, he did not. Though this will be covered in greater detail in a different chapter, the entire Russian narrative was a fraud perpetrated on the American people. As Trump calls it, a hoax. Even the assertions that we know Russia tried to meddle in our election are largely unproven. we know we are going against many Trump supporters, or at least appointees in government, with this opinion. But one cannot or should not so easily equate the type of Tom and Jerry antics that were uncovered nor associate the activity of some nebulous Russians with the Russian state. Most likely, Russia carries out intelligence activities like any other great power and attempts to exert influence in one way or another, but to believe that there was anything special or out of the ordinary about their efforts, that is, those of the Russian government, in the 2016 election is, quite simply, not supported by the facts. The Mueller report, which was supposedly going to find a smoking gun, found nothing related to Trump colluding with Russians. Rather, it cleared him and his campaign of any and all charges. CNN and MSNBC's hysterical and constant protestations notwithstanding. The Fonzie-like inability of the leftist media to be introspective, let alone acknowledge their errors in the wake of the Russian hoax blowing up in their faces, is disturbing to watch. Another liberal outlet, Vox, has a very interesting article online. In it, Sean Illing interviews the aforementioned writer Matt Taibbi. It is fascinating to read, as Illing seems to be at pains to concede some points that Taibbi makes about the media's failures in promoting the Russian collusion story, but wants to hold on to the notion that much good was done. Taibbi ain't buying it and pushes back. Here is Taibbi talking about the mainstream media's reaction to Trump's election. Then, when he became president, the instantaneous decision was to declare him illegitimate and foreign aided. But that's not what the press is supposed to do. That's not our job. Given the seriousness of all this, given the fact that there was this idea floating around in the mainstream that Trump was literally a spy, we absolutely had a responsibility to go down that alley and check it out. But we also had to think about the other possibility, which is, what if it's untrue? Well, if it is untrue, where the hell is this coming from and why? And what was the purpose and what was the motive of the people who wanted us to think this? And we completely abdicated our responsibility in terms of the second half of that equation. Here, Taibbi, again a man of the left and no friend of President Trump, stands up for the role of an honest and free press. He asks the questions which, in the wake of the Mueller and 2 Horowitz reports, every honest reporter should be chasing down the answers to, well, if it's untrue. The claim that Trump was colluding with Russia. Where the hell is this coming from and why? And what was the purpose and what was the motive of the people who wanted us to think this? There is a meme from an HBO series called True Detective. It is apparently a crime show of some sort. We've not seen it, but in the meme, actor Matthew McConaughey is pictured. He looks tough, he looks menacing, sitting there drinking from a flask and smoking a cigarette as he tells the detectives interviewing him, start asking the right effing questions. That is what we need our media to do. That is what we need our law enforcement to do. That is what we as Catholics need to do. Hold the F word if you like, but if the mainstream media were not fake news, they would be asking these questions and more. And Trump's nickname for the mainstream media would not resonate with the American public so well if they began doing so. The Church's views on the role of the media. In the Catechism of the Catholic Church, we find the Church's teaching on the media and its responsibilities included under the 8th commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Serious stuff, apparently. The information provided by the media is at the service of the common good. Society has a right to information based on truth, freedom, justice, and solidarity. The proper exercise of this right demands that the content of the communication be true and, within the limits set by justice and charity, complete. Further, it should be communicated honestly and properly. This means that in the gathering and in the publication of news, the moral law and the legitimate rights and dignity of man should be upheld. Communicated honestly and properly. Traditionally, media stories required solid sourcing. In the Trump era, we have been treated to one of the most prolific sources in American journalism history, an anonymous source close to this person who is seemingly everywhere and nowhere has been cited so frequently in anti-Trump stories, we are surprised he or she does not have a daytime talk show. Trump's administration has been plagued by hostile leaks to the media on the unprecedented scale. As an aside, those who pay close attention have heard the president say or tweet on more than one occasion, "The leaks are real, the news is fake." Trump, knowing that those in government who oppose him, the resistance, use media leaks, a felony in many instances, as a political weapon, entered office with a plan to counter that collusive abuse between Obama administration holdovers and their media contacts. He is prudent after all. When Trump tells us that the leaks are real but the news is fake, he is telling all the world with eyes to see and ears to hear that he has set traps for leakers and their media accomplices, traps into which they have been all too willing to fall. Some media figures, as well as their illicit sources in government, have already been exposed in this way, and more are sure to come. Watch the future news, and we will see if we are proven correct on that score. The record of the media with regards to this search and concern for truth, their most basic function, has been abysmal. Exhibit A could be its long-standing ignoring of the hundreds of thousands of pro-lifers who have marched on Washington, D.C. each year for nearly half a century. A massive, massive rally by any measure, and yet the media has not covered it. True stories that they don't want to push are ignored in favor of narrative engineering efforts and attack pieces of those with whom they disagree. In the case of the president, no anti-Trump story, no matter how sensationalistic, was too out there to run without being properly vetted. The media in this country has needed calling out for many years, and Trump does the country a great service in doing so. You may not like his style, but the way in which he has masterfully used social media to communicate directly with his audience, thereby bypassing the traditional gatekeepers of what the public is allowed to hear, has been remarkably effective and invites a quick discussion of the new media landscape, a landscape which, despite its pitfalls, levels the playing field in a way in which the great Catholic writer of the Edwardian age, Hilaire Belloc, would applaud. Again, the Catechism. It is necessary that all members of society meet the demands of justice and charity in this domain. They should help, through the means of social communication, in the formation and diffusion of sound public opinion. Solidarity is a consequence of genuine and right communication and the free circulation of ideas that further knowledge and respect for others. Though the internet is certainly far from an unmixed blessing, in the area of news dissemination and the cultivation of a truly free press, it is a positive good. Before you laugh and dismiss that notion based on the joke, "I read it on the internet," consider the following. With the advent of the internet, a wide variety of media and access to public files and records is now accessible at the stroke of a keyboard. One can read and digest news from a variety of sources much more easily than ever before. Of course, most people read only news sources that confirm them in their own biases or thoughts. That is a mistake, according to Belloc. One of the most prolific writers in the English language, Belloc is known for his historical work, his essays, his humorous prose for children. Well, he wrote a lot and very well. The Free Press. The first published in 1918, and one of his underappreciated books, is especially germane to this discussion. In it, he identifies a couple of pernicious influences on the press of his time, which only now, in our time, have become effectively countered by the advent of the internet. Consolidation and the role and incredible power of the advisor, or, in more broad terms, money. Before this consolidation occurred, Belloc describes a landscape in which one man could print and sell profitably 1,000 copies of his version of a piece of news, of his opinions, or those of his clique. There were hundreds of other men who, if they took the pains, had the means to set out a rival account and a rival opinion. We shall see how these safeguards decayed and the bad characters described were increased to their present enormity.